Die älteren Staatsmänner Grenadas waren mitschuldig daran, die Nation auf dem Alter des diplomatischen und geopolitischen Gemetzel zu offen. The elder statesman of Grenada was complicit in offering up Grenada at the altar of diplomatic and geopolitical slaughter. I will explain this horrible dereliction of duty. There is a reason why you have elders in society. There's a reason why everybody is not born at the same time. And that reason lies in the fact that the people who came before you would have had certain experiences, and by socializing and teaching you and educating you, they can tell you certain things that would avoid you from making the same mistakes that they made. So you don't need to read palms to predict the future. You can, in some respects, predict the future based on experiences of the past. So again, as I have said before, Grenada, because of its experience in the early 80s, was more positioned than any other Caribbean island to navigate the geopolitical and diplomatic terrain in the US-Venezuela spat. And of course, we know that they failed miserably. But it wasn't just the government. There were people in the upper echelons of the NDC party that in some respects, by saying nothing and by dereliction of duty to the nation, was complicit in what happened. And again, I told you before, former Prime Minister Tillman Thomas, this gentleman bears even more responsibility than just recently in the spat. And I'll tell you why. Because this is the gentleman, I believe, in some respects, that instead of guarding the chicken coop, what did he do? He opened the barnyard's gate and allowed the radical leftists to come into the yard of the farm. And he left the chicken coop unattended so that these foxes could devour the chickens. And I know I'm sounding all poetic and metaphorical here, but I'll break it down for you. If you know, you would have understood that after all the experiences this gentleman, Leslie Pierre, and Lloyd Noel had with these radical leftists in the early 80s, this gentleman thought that it was wise to cuddle and invite these radical leftists into the NDC party. So it was no mystery that the NDC party moved from being a centrist party with centrist ideology to a center-left, then to a radical leftist party in its current state. So you have to understand that former Prime Minister Tillman Thomas bears mutual responsibility in facilitating this transition. This gentleman, in some respects, by allowing and inviting these radical leftists into the NDC party, pretty much sealed the fate of the NDC party. And say what you want to say about Dr. Keith Mitchell, and I may not have agreed with his approach to how he dealt with the last situation with the spat with him and Peter and so forth. But in the harsh reality of the situation, I could understand that Dr. Keith Mitchell was morbidly terrified that what had happened to NDC in its transition from a centrist party to a radical leftist party, that he was afraid the same thing was going to happen to NNP. And not because the gentleman who wanted to offer himself up for the party's leadership himself is a radical leftist. I don't believe so. I believe that Dr. Mitchell understood that the people around this man is trying to hitch a ride with him to power. That is why that the gentleman associated with him, as soon as the election was lost, the recent election, packed his bag and ran up to St. Mark's to have a conversation with Dr. Keith Mitchell and said to him, "Oh, well, you really need to give the leadership of the party to this gentleman now. And he thought that he was doing good and helping this gentleman. But you know what he did? He alerted Dr. Keith Mitchell that he and his cohorts wanted to hitch a ride with the gentleman who wanted to become leadership of the party. And that is what many of them have done. They, in some respects, bastardized this man's character, okay, the current leader of the DPM. They bastardized this man's character because they always want to hitch a ride on his ship. On his leadership vehicle, they want to hitch a ride. And many situations and problems this gentleman has got into is because of the people around him. So a very easy approach and strategic approach could have done with the leadership of the NNP party. The gentleman could have said publicly, I would only run for the leadership of the NNP party if I received the blessings of Dr. Keith Mitchell. Because he is the one who invited me into the NNP. And all the craziness that happened in the party during that time would not have happened. Because it would have put the responsibility on Dr. Keith Mitchell to say yeah or to say no. And if he said no, then everybody will say, oh, whoa. That is not kosher. That is not cool. So in some respect, he would have been forced to say yeah. But when he saw how quickly this gentleman, okay, who happens to be an associate of the gentleman who wanted to be the leader of the NNP party, he said, no. When he saw how quickly this gentleman came to him and said, well, you need to give the leadership of the party to this gentleman. He said, no. So I think he was less afraid and less worried about Mr. David having the leadership of the NNP than he was about the people who were around him. So in some respects, these people around him jeopardized his possibility of becoming the leader in the NNP party by their immature, unstrategic, and premature actions. So these are not people to have around. If this gentleman serious about politics in Grenada and seriously wants to attain some sort of leadership and lead the charge in Grenada, has to dissociate himself from these baggages. So if in such a local political situation, and this gentleman, who was a close associate of Mr. David, didn't advise him properly, rushed and made a premature move, and misfired and alerted Dr. Keith Mitchell of the plot of these people around Mr. David to hijack the NNP. Because we know, everyone knows, they saw the potential of Mr. David and they were trying to hitch a ride on his leadership train. And that is why I tell you guys, and you have to understand, in all of this, they were trying to use Mr. David. They were trying to use him. Because as I have said, if he was so cunning as they tried to paint him to be, he could have played along. He could have been really cool. He could have played nicey with Dr. Mitchell, suck up to him, and he could have gotten the leadership of the party. But the gentleman was honest in his approach to getting the leadership of the party. He offered himself up. Of course, that was a strategic mistake. Because knowing the people around him, when Dr. Keith Mitchell saw these people around him, and this gentleman who rushed to talk to him after the election, Dr. Mitchell said, I'm not going to let happen to NNP what happened to NDC. I'm not going to let NNP become a cabal of radical leftists. See, Mr. David is a statesman. He has shown in word and deed what he wants to do for Grenada. These people around him, these people are the dangerous ones. Because these are the people who will do anything to garner power. It was a dead giveaway. So this man, his associate, basically jeopardize Mr. David's bid for the NNP party. So if this man dropped the ball in such a, relatively simple local political situation with his unstrategic maneuvering, then are you surprised that when it came to a big diplomatic role, okay, and geopolitical situation in the Caribbean, are you surprised that this man, who was all over the media, pretending to advise Grenada on how to deal with this situation, was obviously ill-equipped to advise Grenada, and basically dropped the ball again in the so-called advice he was given to Grenada as to how to deal with that situation. So people can be trusted to make strategic decisions. It's quite obvious. Such serious diplomatic and geopolitical strategic decisions, you can't take advice from this gentleman. So going forward, I hope you understand, and you saw how inept this gentleman was, that you as Grenadian people should never, ever take any advice from this gentleman, especially advice of a political strategic nature, because he is not equipped to make those decisions, as was shown how he dropped the ball and destroyed Mr. David's chance of becoming leader of the NNP party. But in some respects, I'm happy. Mr. David found an off-ramp, and guess what? Now he has a party where he can chart his own course. Worked out well for him. The next thing he has to do is dissociate himself from all this baggage around him, in the interest of Grenada, because I think generally the gentleman has a good heart and has shown that he's able to work with both sides of the aisle. And that is why I continue to support the gentleman. But for his own good and for the good of Grenada, is to dissociate himself from the baggages around him. So let's get back to the complicity of some elder statesmen. And let's get in particular to Dr. Francis Alexis, preeminent intellectual mind in Grenada. Not just that, this gentleman, Dr. Francis Alexis, in the early 80s, post-PRG revolution, was one of the first on the scene trying to garner some leadership for Grenada. So this gentleman saw it all. He knows the radical leftist characters from the early 80s. But what did this gentleman do? In the US-Venezuela spat, one of the most serious diplomatic and geopolitical situations in the Caribbean in recent time, what did he do? He said nothing. For all the intellect this man has, this man said nothing. This man remained on the sidelines while Grenada was being offered up on the altar of diplomatic and geopolitical slaughter. And he said nothing. For all the experiences this man had, he said nothing. But guess what? Guess what he was obsessed with? This gentleman, in his latter golden years, was obsessed with trying to go and lower the age of consent for young girls and boys. This is what this gentleman, Dr. Francis Alexis, was obsessed with and was complicit and was trying to help facilitate a proposal made by the lieutenant colonel. Okay? He was trying to facilitate a proposal made where the lieutenant colonel said, oh, well, I've been looking into it, and you don't need some sort of referendum to get this passed. Guess what? If you have a 2/3 majority in parliament, you can get it done. This is what Dr. Francis Alexis was obsessed with doing. Okay? While a geopolitical and diplomatic slaughter of Grenada was brewing in the Caribbean. So you see, it begs the question, does these gentlemen, these elder statesmen, really care about Grenada? No. They were more concerned about selling out the youth of Grenada to worldwide NGOs. They wanted to attract US Yankee dollars from these NGOs who would have hijacked the use of Grenada in the process. They know that there's massive NGO money, that white liberals and global white liberals are more than willing to fund the lowering of the age of consent for kids in Grenada. So as much as they pretend, some of them, to be socialist Marxists, and I'm not talking about Dr. Francis Alexis, he's not no socialist Marxist, but as much as the others, the lieutenant colonel, who are telling us about, oh, you don't need to go to the people, you don't need a referendum. No way. You can have this done by 2/3 majority. So as much as they all pretend to be some socialist Marxists, they still want NGO US dollars. You think they didn't know? You think they didn't see that? That is massive NGO money that would have descended on this, lowering of the age of consent like vultures, and there would have been money flowing into that. Because there's nothing better that the NGOs would like to see. The corruption of the youth of Grenada, the destruction of the youth of Grenada. And it's no mystery. You think there's not a connection between Polaris and all of this? Why you think Mount Sinai will be more than happy to quote-unquote assist Grenada with this Polaris thing? Because they know. Even if they don't get that massive hospital, but even if they get a little semblance of something, and in the meantime, with the existing hospital, guess what? They can use it as an opportunity to experiment on the young kids of Grenada. Not just in the field of sexuality and abortion. And you know how cunning and devious they are. They always cloak all of this under the banner of sexual and reproductive health, women's health. And the gullible get taken. And these people don't leave America and come to Grenada without benefit. I mean, the little couple $1 million they're getting, that ain't nothing in the big scheme of things. But they see the potential for research. Research without red tape that they'll have to face in the United States. And there is where they can make the millions. They can get an opportunity, like guinea pigs, to experiment on an unsuspecting population like Grenada. This, I believe, is their plan, ultimately. These people are master wolves. You think these people in Grenada, these people who can't even understand a little geopolitical spat, who cannot even defend you, these ninjas you have down there, you think they understand? Do you think these people understand what's going on? Please. Please. These people barely understand coconut politics, but also in the field of psychology. Because then, this lowering in the age of consent, as soon as these little kids have some sort of problem, psychological or otherwise, they will be ready and willing to put them on some sort of medication. So you have to understand. And they could experiment on these young cats. That is why, okay, that is why Mount Sinai probably was licking his fingers and say, Grenada. Because the level of oversight in the United States, they come to Grenada and they pretend to be some big honcho and the authority, guess what? They would be able to get certain things done without bureaucratic tape that they could not or would not be able to do in the United States. So it'd be a feeding ground for experimentation for them. So I want you to see how dangerous and serious this is. And Dr. Francis Alexis, in some respects, was trying to facilitate this lowering of the age of consent. And the lieutenant colonel was behind a major push to have that happen. I want you to see through all of this, because you guys are sleeping. So while you're asleep, these people who pretend to be socialist Marxists, because they ain't in reality, they're some of the most devious capitalists. Okay? And I want you to understand this. You probably may not have realized, but I'm going to break it down for you today. These people push that socialist Marxist narrative in order to make you less competitive and to make you less able to compete with them. Because while they're talking and pushing and preaching to you, the socialist Marxist, comrade, yeah. Guess what? These suckers are some of the most devious capitalists. I mean, a lot of these intellectual petty bourgeois, I tell you, they're lawyers, doctors, economists, this, that, the other. So these people don't care about those socialist in reality, they don't care about this no socialist Marxist thing. It's a front. These are devious capitalists. And all those who pretended during the PRG and are still pretending, they themselves, all they wanted was to become petty bourgeois themselves. And now they have arrived. They have arrived. So you think they want to rock the boat now? You think they really want to rock the boat now? They're living high and mighty. You think they care about all the comrades that fell in 83? You think they care about their comrades? You think all of them who, they talking about all this US-Venezuela thing, all the chess, all the ruggers, you think they care about the comrades that fell? Because I'll tell you what, if they truly cared, you know what they would have done? They would have created some sort of fund to help the sons and daughters for all these soldiers that fell during 83. They'd have created a fund to help their sons and daughters. And some of these people, their own comrades fell. But I asked them this question. What did they do for the sons and daughters of these gentlemen who fell? What did they do? Where's the fund to assist their sons and daughters? Where is the fund set up to ensure that their sons and daughters get free education? Because their parents or their parent sacrificed their blood and sweat and tears and life and was not wrong to raise them. But that's what I'm trying to tell you. These are hypocrites. These are petty bourgeois intellectual hypocrites. But as I always tell you, they know me. And I know them all too well. So we have a mutual understanding. So, to the credit of a very brave woman in Grenada, who has, for decades, tried to warn and tried to remind the Grenadian people of the deviousness of these radical leftists, to her credit, Miss Peggy. Because this woman, post-83, she started off with MBPM and tried to, always keep the memory of Morris alive, and also tried to warn the Grenadian people about these radical leftists. And before you say, this guy really have a thing with radical leftists, he don't like these people, and he doesn't like these individuals. My friends, it's not about these individuals and these people. I know all of them. It's not about them. As people of the book, you should understand that your fight is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against garbage, against corruptive philosophy and ideology. This Marxist socialist philosophy and ideology has shown in multiple ways that it doesn't work, and especially in the Grenadian situation. It is destructive to the moral and every other fiber of Grenadian society. For the last 40 years, post-83, the success of Grenada, economic and otherwise, has been by the promotion of capitalistic values. Those are the values that has allowed the society to elevate the way it has elevated. Because a lot of people, grown people, we know the sort of living conditions that some people lived in the 70s and early 80s. We know. And now you have so much progress in terms of houses, infrastructure, cars. You have so much. And these petty bourgeois intellectuals, in order to make you not as competitive with them, they try to throw spokes in your wheel. They try to put things in your way and talk all the socialist Marxists and brother, community and work for free, so that you cannot compete with them, so that they can maintain their privileged position. It's a ruse. It's a game. That is how they keep you less competitive. Because they realize that the regular man and the middle class man was slowly rising. He's working hard. He has access to capital. He can do stuff. But these petty bourgeois are like, no. These people are getting too close. They're coming too close to the social strata. So let me try to keep them down. That is the ploy. But let's get back to this brave woman, Peggy. This woman, for decades, every campaign, she talks about the radical leftists and what they did in '83. To remind Grenada to never forget. And unfortunately, I don't know, probably in the last campaign, she didn't talk much about it. So I believe she might have believed that there was some sort of redemption. But I guarantee you now that with recent events in Grenada, that if she had any slight belief that there was redemption and a change in mentality, guess what? She knows for a fact that that is not the case. With the promotion of divisive, virulent approaches to situations in Grenada and creating a climate in Grenada that may be reminiscent of past climates that we do not want to remember or want to deal with, guess what? We're heading down the wrong path. And you know, in the past, she took a lot of flack for it, for always bringing it up and trying to keep Grenadians, keep it fresh in Grenadians' memory. She took a lot of flack. But now I hope you understand what this very brave woman was trying to say. And some of you may not know what this woman had to go through personally and why she understands who she's dealing with. I was there. I was there the evening when they came for her. I was there. And that's all I'm going to say on that subject. So she understands the situation. And when you see people like myself speaking, we're not speaking out of our asses. Okay? We understand. I'll tell you a sweet story and in some respects, see your story. But there were some young gentlemen, and I lived my days in St. Andrews. Some young gentlemen. Remember one time, Morris and his whole crew came up. I think they was having a rally in the park or something. And these young gentlemen, they were, let's say, familiar with many of these people. And they got a ride. I think it was a Toyota Cressida back in the days. They got a ride in the car. And it was such a joyful thing that they got a couple of other friends in the neighborhood to get into the car, to ride around. And they were all waving for their friends when they were passing by. Because it was a fun. It was a big thing. You know what I'm saying? But I just say this story to illustrate that there's some things that we understand. Okay? And these same young gentlemen almost perished. Luckily, fate was on their side. So when you understand that Sister Pegs, you should talk a lot about this, it's because even I have the memories in the same house. When Morris used to come by, and she would say to him, he said, he took a cigarette out to light, and she would say to him, you can't smoke a cigarette inside here. You got to smoke it on the terrace, because she had some allergy issues. And he'll smile and comply and go out on the terrace and take a smoke. So when we talking because we understand. But for all of you who have infatuation with Morris, some of you who just saw him barely in a rally from afar, okay? We understand. Some of you never even seen a gentleman in the flesh. But all you have some romanticized infatuation of who and who wasn't the man. Why do you think the gentleman was so smart towards the end? And he said, look, I cannot be antagonistic to the United States. I have to go negotiate. I have to have conversations to ease the temperature. But guess what? The megalomaniacs in them think they're bigger than bad. Yeah. Stand up to the United States. And that same megalomaniac attitude is what got Grenada again into the trouble it got in recently with the US-Venezuela spat. Is it any mystery? So again, when I tell you that the NDC is hijacked by radical leftists, that is not an exaggeration.